Interlude. The Iron Harbor. More than 1,200 feet of dark Lautani steel slouched on the shoreline like a crocodile scanning the calm waters of the harbor for prey. The battleship hull, even without its superstructure fully assembled, cast a vast shadow in the amber light of the sunset which devoured the crowds that had gathered around the shipway to watch its launch. The harbor itself played host to several dozen warships of the Navy, waiting to welcome their Titan sister into the water. Among them were 3 young aircraft carriers, all dwarfed by the giant which would soon be put to sea. The inexperienced among the crowd knew as well as any storied shipwright or sailor that its bulk was without equal, and that its creation heralded the dawn of a new era in warfare upon the waves. Shipyards and forges had needed to be entirely restructured just to accommodate the nascent warship's slumbering bulk. Talk of the construction had swept the Isles, and the proudest of whispers were issued by those who could truthfully claim the hands of their own sons or husbands had laid or welded metal on the future pride of the Lautani Navy. Even from her lofty perch upon the clergy platform just behind the unfinished ship's mighty stern, High Priestess Isyana felt the scale of the slumbering beast her nation had forged. Isyana shivered in spite of the tropical air. From amidst the bustle of dock workers and priestly aspirants preparing for the final launch ritual on the ground below, a shrill signal whistle sounded. Its bite transported her to Horabaya, the sterling port city of her birth, now named Estlan by its conquerors, where only bitterness waited for her. When the Sholoshaishans had come marching during the war nearly 20 years past, Isyana had watched artillery devour the row house in which her family had lived. She had watched with the wide eyes of a naive daughter her mother's final minutes spent urging them toward evacuation at the docks, while clutching at the shrapnel wound in her stomach, insisting they not wait for her. She had listened to her brother's defeated farewell when they were separated at those docks, knowing, despite the harbor master's assurances to the contrary, that there would be no more boats for boys of close to fighting age, and that she would never see Risoldi again. She had listened as elephants in the governor's stables across town had trumpeted their fear and agony while the Pearl District burned around them. Then the wooden whistles of the kind shaped on the Isles were sounded, and the little steamers had hurried away. Their homes were razed to ash in their wake. "We have word by telegram from agents in Tepeklan that the prince's procession has arrived at the temple, Your Holiness," a wizened voice reported. Isyana did not need to see the woman to know the speech of her equerry. "Then we launch as soon as the slipway is prepared," the priestess replied, looking down upon the murmuring crowds. Things must look much the same in the Sholoshaishan capital, a mirror to their great national adversary, whether in victory or defeat. "The Order wants to warn you a final time that the attempts will probably fail before they proceed with the prince," her equerry said, coming up to rest beside her at the railing. "They grow nervous, I think." "You must reiterate to them the goal," Isyana told her, dagger-pupiled eyes still combing the crowd. "It matters not whether we succeed or fail, only that the Sholoshaishans know we are out for blood, while we maintain the ability to deny responsibility. We are attempting to wake a giant, while simultaneously making it appear to be the giant's fault. It's the only way the Colossus can ever be brought to heel." Chahaya, nodding and allowing a slight smile to breach her wizened, stern features, said, "Perhaps it is more honest to say that I have grown nervous." "Sholoshaiti dwarfs our country, Sister Chahaya," Isyana said, finally looking over to meet her old friend's gaze. "Her empire, in the old world and the new, shares a border with almost every nation beneath the sun. Already we are outnumbered and outgunned, outproduced and outmaneuvered. If the coalition is to succeed, we need a moment of weakness at which to strike, lest the Triskelion banner wave across the globe by the new century's end. We've been over it many times with the sea mood, Chahaya. I know it well, Your Holiness, Chahaya assured her, gray head bowed. But it does not relieve my worry. It gnaws at me, sister, more than I would care to admit. Even with the aid of the Coalition, the task seems so insurmountable. We are taught to fear not, for the goddess upon the tide will ever carry the day, but I grow weak beneath the shadow of the struggle to come. Isyana exhaled, her narrowed eyes scanning the northeastern horizon over the waters of Besipalabuhan, the Iron Harbor, heart of the Lautani Duumvirit's dominion, in the direction of her far-distant rival in Tepeklan. In that moment, the venom of centuries made it seem to Chahaya as if her master could actually see the teeming streets and mighty pyramids, could hear the chanting crowds and groaning prisoners in the shadow of dreaded Shahuitzul. This war is not preferable, Isyana said, shaking her head, her feline ears flattened against her skull. It is perhaps even less preferable than the loud Sholoshaishan war just decades past. But it will be far preferable, great as its challenges may be, to a war against Sholoshaiti 20 or 30 years on. We would drown under their weight then, even with all the Coalition at our backs. Isyana turned to face Chahaya once again, their eyes exchanging more than words could convey. The uncertainty of their people, their land, even their gods, was writ large in the silent seconds which passed between them. If we are to be slain by the god of blood, the High Priestess began, then let us die on our feet, with the strength still left in us to struggle. The people of the sea deserve that chance. She pointed to the ship before them, saying, Our greatest allies under Sholoshaiti's shadow agree. We've all seen the writing on the wall. Now is the time to unleash the tide. Your word is the will of the Laud, Your Holiness, Chahaya told her. I know I am wrong to worry, but it happens all the same. I'll give word to the Master of the Seeking Hand, and let him know that he can act with impunity. Thank you, sister, Isyana said. You'll stay a moment for the launch, won't you? Chahaya agreed, the whistles and bustling of the shipwrights speaking to the final preparations underway. Though the High Priestess and her equerry could not see it, their minds traced the outline of the great toothy shark's maw which was formed by the ship's prow. Monstrous eyes, wide and flared with the iris-void excitement of feeding fish, awaited just as eagerly, their rims of blackest jet making them gleam high on the battleship's face. Already they smoked with the fumes of the vast diesel engines that hummed within her, for though the ship had yet to free its propellers or take to the water, the first sparks of the newborn entity that would come to possess the warship as a brain possesses a body were already being breathed into life by the priestess who tended the engine room. The ship had already been granted the flame of life. It now needed to slake the thirst of birth upon blood to be made whole. Off to the side of their platform, down the edge of the slipway, more than 1,000 nude Chamar-caste girls, one for each foot of the Titan's length, were being marched around the hull to their places in ceremonially prepared cubbies along the slipway, the collective gaze of the crowd stalking them all the while. When the lever was pulled and the battleship was sent roaring into the harbor's still waters, all of them would be crushed by its 100,000 tons. Their blood the first it would taste in what all prayed would be a long and successful hunt at sea. Long had the teachings of the Laut, Mother of the Sea, taught her children to bind the souls of her handmaidens, called Diri in the Lautani tradition, to their vessels of war. Such strong Diri required equally meaningful provender to tide them over until they might find prey at sea. Thus, the blood of firstborn daughters was given to fill the belly of the Leviathans, that these girls of lower birth might find meaning and advancement in rebirth, and the Diri might come to trust the Lautani who summoned them. A final horn was sounded up on the docks overlooking the slipway, giving the all-clear to High Priestess Isyana on her platform. In silence, with none of the bombast that might have accompanied a Sholosha'ishan ritual, she raised high her left hand, palm towards the sea in deference, and waited for the hush of all within view which followed. Isyana's right hand, resting on her lever, dropped, and with a grace only the practiced shipwrights of the Lautani archipelago could master, the ship's stern skidded in near silence away from her, the noise of displaced air almost as loud as the muted roll of the ship and its guiding poppets along the greased slipway. The mangled forms of the offered Chemar lowborn came into view before the frothy tropical water was dyed crimson by the battleship's entry, the mighty swell of water thrown aloft by the prow's crash into the sea looking like the aftermath of a crocodile's frenzied strike. A low rumble like thunder sounded, shaking Isyana's very bones. A trembling issued out from the warship's hull, disrupting the waves sent out by her launch as the whole of her unfinished form began to vibrate. Black fumes surged in sudden fury from the eyes upon her flanks, and the toothy maw in her prow seemed to flex with a life not native to metal. Though she had no horn, the newborn giant was roaring. All across the bay, the newborn's waiting sisters sounded their own horns in response. The chorus rattled the windows and shook the shutters of every building in the harbor, and the shoreline seemed to tremble beneath the feet of a city that watched the spectacle with eyes wide and hearts thrumming. The gathered crowd, hands held aloft facing the sea in mimicry of Isyana, murmured a mantra, each line ending in the name of the battleship, and the Diri now awakening within her, so long anticipated and so lovingly crafted by the undisputed masters of the sea. Pamecha Dunia, they called it, the breaker of continents.